the mic on now. How's everybody doing tonight? My name is Christopher Adornato. I am the Director of Education for the Monmouth Film Festival. So before we begin, I kind of just want to see who here has heard of the Monmouth Film Festival prior to this event? We have people? Okay, good. Listen, we're new. This is going to be our third year, so we know it's about getting our name out there. Hopefully you guys can come this August. And just before I forget, there's going to be another screening of a John Ford movie called The Quiet Man, March 19th right here. So hopefully you guys can come and join us for that one too. So before we begin, I want to introduce everybody right here on the panel. So starting from the end, I have Joan Ellis. After a lifelong appreciation for cinema, Joan began writing reviews. Currently, she is the film critic for Two River Times, where her reviews have earned a Critical Writing Award of the New Jersey Press Association. In the middle, we have Robert Scott. Robert is a specialist professor of film and digital media at Monmouth University and the lead editor of ET-Centric, the Industry Inside Exchange. He was formerly with New Technology and New Media at the Walt Disney Company. And sitting right next to me, we have Stephanie Coen. Stephanie is the Associate Artistic Director right here at Two River Theaters. And previously, she was the Director of Communication at Seattle Itwin Theater and Director of Publication at the Public Theater and Magazine Editor of American Theater Magazine. All right, so I got that part out of the way. So now we just seen this amazing film. Who liked it? Everybody enjoyed it? One of the things I want to talk about right off the bat with our panel is we have this great movie, Shadow of Doubt, directed by the great Alfred Hitchcock. And it was written by Thornton Wilder. Now, we also have a play coming up on February 17th that Thornton Wilder wrote a book about and that you guys are doing a play. So before we move forward, I want Stephanie to kind of just give a little synopsis of the play, The Bridge of San Luis Rey, because not everybody might know about that book. So can you just give a little brief description?
Yeah, first I'll say thank you to you, and thank you for showing this amazing film. What a treat to see it on a big screen. Yeah, amazing, right? The Bridge of San Luis Rey is a novel by Thornton Wilder. Thornton Wilder is the only person to win 3 Pulitzer Prizes, 2 for drama, for Our Town and the Skin of Our Teeth, and 1 for his novel, The Bridge of San Luis Rey. It is set in 18th century Peru, and the act of the novel is a footbridge breaks, and 5 people who were crossing this footbridge fall to their deaths. Happens right at the beginning, no spoilers. And a character named Brother Juniper decides to look into this event and see whether he can determine, based on the lives of these 5 travelers who have fallen, whether it is an act of God or of random chaos in the world. David Greenspan, who is really one of the singular figures in the American theater, he is a writer, an actor, has adapted it for the stage, and he is playing one of the leading parts. There are 9 actors in it. We will not be putting a bridge on stage. Part of the genius of what David Greenspan is doing is he is making us think about the experience of being in a theater. And so it is a little meta-theatrical. You get the full story of who these 5 people are, but you're always aware that you are in a theatrical setting. And we'll talk more about it later, I'm sure. But that's a little brief synopsis.
Great, thank you very much. And I just want to point this out. This is the only screenplay Thornton Wilder wrote, was this one. So I thought that was very interesting. And I thought another interesting fact is they're about the same age, Alfred Hitchcock and Thornton Wilder. I mean, I think one's a couple of years older, Alfred Hitchcock. I could be wrong on my Wikipedia checkup on that, but I find that interesting because we see the way they approach life differently, in my opinion. So Thornton Wilder, I want to talk about these parallels that we see. Thornton Wilder loved to write about small towns. A lot of people might not know this particular play, but they know Our Town, which is probably his most famous play that he wrote. And Our Town also takes place in a small town. And this right off the bat, they hit you home on that small town. I want to start off with Joan over here. Joan, can you talk about that theme that Thornton writes about, how Alfred Hitchcock takes the small town and just turns it and kind of makes it, in essence, creepy, eerie? He kind of just does something to small towns.
I'm still trying to recover from this movie. I also think that everybody was themselves except one guy, and he was something way beyond himself, something way out of this small town. Do you think that's because he has made that deliberately, the comparison between a whole other life and all the people in that town?
I mean, it's an interesting question. Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, that threw me off.
Sorry.
No, I think it's a fantastic question. I'm reminded of the fact that Hitchcock had said a couple times that you don't see a lot of character development in a suspenseful thriller like this. And he was very, very excited to the fact that there was a level of character development in this, as we just saw. I suspect that that's a result of Thornton Wilder's influence on the first draft of the script. Yes, I think there's one character who's completely outside of himself. I think similar to the Bridge story, the author it questions us to think about whether or not there's something that a purpose, a destination, a reasoning behind something beyond our own will, right?
Right.
And I think that's what we're exploring with this film to a degree. We've got that small town, that our town flipped on its head, as only Hitchcock can do. Somebody described it as, what was it, Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life meets David Lynch's Blue Velvet meets Little Red Riding Hood, right? So you do have this out-of-town individual who comes into this wonderful setting with all the Hitchcockian elements in the film itself, the way it's shot, the way it's framed, the use of the stairwells, the POV, the different angles. We always know when something's a little awry, when something's unsettling, not just the soundtrack, not just the music, but also the way things are framed and the dialogue and the way they're interacting. So yeah, I would, my short answer, excuse me, would be yes, I agree. I think that's an accurate depiction.
Were you struck at all by the fact this movie was made, 46 years ago, I think?
1943, I believe, the exact year. 40, okay.
Okay. And I was struck, I'm still struck by the difference between what they didn't have then and what we have now in movies that allow movies to be so much more sophisticated now. But boy, did this make its point.
Well, I don't think you'd have a scene where the lead character talks about women.
No.
the way he described them.
You sure
right?
wouldn't.
And I believe the character that this was originally based on was known for strangling his landladies. At least that's one of the things I had seen. So that dialogue particularly jumped out at me after learning that. And the fact that the audience reacted. I heard the audience reacting way more than the characters reacted.
Yeah.
So clearly that was one moment that's shows us that we're in a different era. Certainly, detectives fall in love very quickly in this world. So that's something else that we wouldn't get away with a film today. But yeah, despite the fact that how many decades old, I think that the thrilling aspects and the suspense are still there, and the kind of not knowing what's going to happen next, and hoping that something goes in a certain direction, even though you think it's not going to. I think that's still there.
I agree.
Stephanie, do you have anything to add to that?
No, not to add to that specifically, but to pick up on something you said about love. I was really struck watching the film today how many different love stories there are in it, and how many different ways of looking at love, both healthy and very unhealthy. And that seemed very progressive and really fun to watch that, in all these characters and the way they interrelate.
I would add something. I'm sorry. I would add that
okay.
I was also struck, in addition to that, and I agree, it's been a long time since I've seen this. I saw it in film school, and I won't tell you how long ago that was, but also decades. And the comedy in this, right? And I heard a lot of you laughing in the first half. During that character development component, specifically, a lot of very funny comedy. I don't remember that. And I don't remember it in a lot of Hitchcock films. I know there's comedic moments. And again, I'm wondering if that's a Thornton Wilder influence there. I'm not sure.
I think you're right, yeah.
Not to get off the topic, but were those moments funny in 2018? Or do you think those moments are funny in, say, 1946, whatever the exact year is? 43. I'm being
know.
Wikipedia in real time.
Yeah, we'd have to go back in time and live then. I think that certainly we see it with that type of writing with the family in particular, where they're all kind of talking at the same time. And we see that with, Aaron Sorkin or David Mamet or and a lot of contemporary playwrights and not a lot, but some of the better contemporary playwrights arguably and television and film writers. And I think that comedy holds up. I think that interplay of family and relationships and love and those universal themes. But the fact that there's that banter and they're all kind of talking when the kid was counting the steps, and
Yeah.
I have a 5-year-old and he counts everything now, because he can. And so those little human moments, right? I don't know that we have that as much in today's films. We could ask our critic, because we make room for other things that maybe we didn't make room for back then,
Yeah.
like explosions and chases.
I think you're right.
Well, great. I want to bring up the play that's going to be coming up. Going back to Stephanie here, one of the things that I find fascinating that Thornton talks about, he really has people taking a tragic event, and he normally, I say normally, not counting this movie we just saw, it's really them looking as a moment, and it's kind of like a defining moment in their lives. In this particular play, The Bridge, of San Luis Rey, the monk, I'm sorry about that, he goes out searching for, in essence, truth. What is it to be? I don't want to say he's looking for God's answer, but he wants to give these people that died meaning. Yeah. In this particular movie, I don't know if I see that, but at least, or Hitchcock put his tone on it, his feel on it, it's a little different. Can you talk about that? Can you talk about the way Thornton Wilder really has characters have that inner spectrum journey that they go through between this and like Our Town and stuff like that?
I will do my best. That's a big question. Thornton Wilder, I'm going to read something he wrote, actually. This is from a 1930 letter to a friend who had asked about his first 3 novels, which included The Bridge of San Luis Rey. And Wilder wrote, "It seems to me that my books are about what is the worst thing that the world can do to you, and what are the last resources one has to oppose to it." And that has to do with, yes, this fate or God's will or whatever it is, this terrible event where you fall to your death, but the people who are left behind. And that's a lot of what Our Town is about, and I think that's what a lot of this film is about in this flipping of the small town on its head. The interconnectedness among all of us, the interrelationships. And his characters do wrestle, as you say, with what is their place in the world and where do they find meaning. And what he comes down to again and again is you find meaning in the daily acts of everyday life and in relationships and in just being present, though, being present in the everyday moment.
I just want to add to that because I believe, it could be wrong, that really the Charlies are kind of 2 sides of the same coin in every aspect, between their age, the sex. There's times when they're laying in bed and one's on this side of the room and one's on this side of the room. I mean, in every aspect we see a juxtapose of the 2 Charlies. And they're almost fighting with each other to see what Charlie's going to come out ahead. In fact, even at the last scene, the struggle on the train, you really don't know what Charlie's going to survive. And it's really this internal struggle of the Charlies. I mean, that's kind of what you're saying. You want to talk about that, both Rob and Joan?
I agree. I think I know more about the film than I do Wilder's book, but I'll say that in classic Hitchcock good versus evil, we see pairings to give illustrations. He was big on symbolism. The emanating dark cloud, the smoke coming out of the train to indicate that danger is on its way. And he once said that You spend so much time and money and energy on those little moments, and he doesn't think anyone or most people even notice those things, but they are part of that visual storytelling, right? The pairing of things, first and foremost, the two Charlies. That represent so many different things, but in its essence, good versus evil. The two detectives, the two train station scenes. There's a whole series of pairings, and all those little great moments. I mean, you saw that was Hitchcock with the spades playing bridge on the train, right? So we have
You just gave away my question I was going to ask.
So he wasn't on the train. So sorry, sir. But those kind of iconic approaches to filmmaking that he's known for are ways to visually tell the story of that good versus evil. I don't know whether or not it has anything to do beyond, whether it has to do with God or faith or religion or the afterlife or an influence on a grander scheme, as much as Hitchcock really, really liked bringing tension and evil and menace to everyday lives, because that's our universal theme, right? That's our world. That's what we understand. So he made us afraid of heights. He made us afraid of taking a shower, certainly. It's the same way Spielberg made us afraid of swimming with sharks, or swimming without sharks. And now he's making us afraid of our own family. I mean, think about that. That's a big deal, right? And that's something we can all relate to, which makes it all the more frightening and tense, right?
Yeah. Because it could happen. It's real.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Birds is my favorite.
I think also it's a big thing with him as to what goes on in people beyond what we see. Who they are, what are the dimensions of them. We all talk to each other through our lives in this theater, in our homes, everywhere else. What else is there that we never talk about? Because in that movie, there's an awful lot going on inside that we never see.
And I want to kind of add to that, because one thing that I think both Hitchcock and Wilder do is they hold the mirror up right to your face. And that scene that you talked about before, where Uncle Charlie was talking about women, he at one point looks directly at the camera. He's looking off camera, and then right at the end, when he kind of just puts the screw in the back of a female, what he thinks of a female, he looks right at the camera. He is holding the ugliness of society right up to you and looking at it. And I kind of think that Wilder does the same thing sometimes. He holds the tragedy right to you and just lets you see it. You want to talk about that part?
I think you said it very well. He does hold the mirror up, and he holds the tragedy up, but also the joy and the beauty up. The duality that you're talking about of the two Charlies. Wilder is big on duality, and that in our town, who can understand and treasure life while they're living it is the question. And he is asking us to hold a mirror up to just the way we live. And one of the things that always struck me was his humanism as well. Wilder was a great experimentalist, but he was a great humanist. And so he's showing us everything, the darkness and the light.
So I want to kind of bring up to my last question, then we're going to ask the audience for some questions and jump in. One of the things that I kind of saw from the film, looking back at this, is really whose film is this? We probably right off the bat, well, this is a Hitchcock film, right? Everybody thought that. And as Stephanie's talking about Thornton Wilder, you start to look at this and say, maybe this is Thornton Wilder's film. Who influenced who, do you think, they were both young at this time. This is well before Hitchcock did a lot of his famous movies that you said you liked a lot before. So who do you think was the bigger influence on this movie? Was it Wilder or was it Hitchcock, in your opinion? Joan?
That's a tough one for me, because in the first place, it's been many years since I saw that book, and I don't remember it, but I think he is terribly concerned with painting the portrait of each of those people and throwing it out to us and letting us try to decide who they are. But
Well,
You know-
I agree. My understanding is that this story was pitched directly to Hitchcock by someone at the studio, and it was based on an actual mass murderer. And they threw this idea out there, and this idea of the Merry Widow murderer, and that's the Merry Widow Waltz. I mean, there's all these tie-ins to that that are wonderful in the film. And then Hitchcock worked with Wilder on a first draft, which I believe was largely Wilder's draft. They had worked together on a couple of components of it. In fact, I believe Wilder also, once production got underway, had assisted with location scouting and signing off on cast and things of that nature, which is kind of unheard of. But it also went to Hitchcock's wife. It went to a couple other writers. It had some other hands on the story. I'm guessing that, like we said before, that humor, that element of all the things that are going on that we don't actually hear, certainly the small town America from this filmmaker who wasn't American, and it's so wonderful in that regard. I'm guessing that that's all Wilder, and the character development. I mean, Hitchcock's even said his films don't have that level of character development, so I'm guessing that that's got to be Wilder as well.
I would think so.
Stephanie, what's your thoughts on this before we go to Q&A?
Yeah, I think Wilder gets a lot of the credit. Absolutely, I think that you said it very well, and I love that there is that title card at the beginning, with special thanks to Thornton Wilder, that Hitchcock called him out and acknowledged him in that way.
I'm always a big fan of the idea of, the French have a term called the auteur, means the author of the film. And usually it's very evident. And I don't think in this one it is. That's just my thought. I think it's really a combination of two great masters making a movie, once in a lifetime kind of collaboration. So I want to bring it to the audience. Does anybody have any questions? It could be about any Hitchcock film or anything else or any Thornton Wilder play. We have a mic over here. She has a question over here. I think there's going to be somebody with a mic right there. Yep.
Thank you. That's about the third or fourth time I've seen this movie. But one of the things that struck me that I don't remember really focusing on the last time I saw it was Hume Cronin's character and the relationship with the father, which I really didn't pay attention to when I took a Hitchcock class a few years ago. It seemed like a gay subtext, maybe. Anyone else think that?
Quite
Who wants
possibly.
to get this question?
That's always a kind of a tricky question. Yes, there's certainly portraying a certain type of character. Whether or not there was a homosexual subtext to it, I'm not certain. I believe that was Cronin's screen debut, right? And not just debut with Hitchcock. I think that was his first film. He went on to do Lifeboat with Hitchcock and
10,000 other things.
yeah, he collaborated with him on a number of things, right? I don't know if he helped with pre-production or what that collaboration entailed. But yes, he was a meek, demure, but necessary character, right? Because we've got to introduce that element of why this small town America is so aware of killing on such a horrific but comedic level. And I thought he did that brilliantly. I don't know whether or not he was gay, but
That's quite a subtext for 1942 on
yeah, but
film.
not uncommon.
No, I don't mean it was uncommon.
Oh.
I just mean in a film.
Right.
I'm not sure. Stephanie
Good
might have
question.
something.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to add, Wilder himself was gay, and so there may very well have been, in the writing of that character, something.
Interesting. Who else has a question for us? We have another gentleman over here. I'm sorry if I'm picking on this side. I'll get that side next.
I was wondering if you noticed one of Hitchcock's idiosyncrasies is he always appeared in every one of his films.
Yeah.
Did anyone see him tonight? I looked diligently.
He was in this film. He was on the train when they were headed from Philly to Santa Rosa, and he was the one that had the full flush, straight flush, or whatever you call
Yeah,
it.
the cards.
Spades for
Yeah.
bridge.
Playing
Yeah.
cards.
Yeah.
You only see just kind of a profile.
I think one thing I want to add with Hitchcock, and this is just an amazing aspect, he made almost 60 films, like around there, give or take. And if you put that in context, Steven Spielberg, who's been making movies since he was 21, I guess, something like that, and he's 60-something now, has only made 30 films. So that's just Hitchcock made it basically a film a year for basically his entire career. It's just amazing. I don't think there's any other filmmaker who has that type of body of work. Yeah, I could be wrong on that. I'd have to look on that, but it's just an amazing amount of films. Is there another question over here? Somebody over here? I can't see the audience. We got one up there. George, there's one up there.
I believe over the course of 50 years, he did 37 cameos, if I'm not mistaken. So he did quite a few, and some a little larger than others, and certainly we see that today. There's a lot of filmmakers who show up in their films today.
We have a question, go ahead.
Ironically, my question was also about the discussion that went on between the father and his friend, but the fact that they were talking about murder sort of as a parlor game, and it reminded me of your thought of pairings, you know, that you have this, they're having this discussion of murder like it's a parlor game that they're playing, and then there's this actual murder going on in the minds of, but I wondered if you saw any more deep meaning in including that whole, you know, line of interaction, and also the fact that the friend ends up actually saving the girl in the end instead of killing somebody.
Go ahead, Bob.
I think that for me, there's two things going on, and it's an interesting observation. Number one, I think, again, it's one of those classic Hitchcock pairings. Right? You've got the kind of comedic, you know, way to approaching that, and then you've got, you know, the parallel universe of that, you know, real killing going on, or murder mystery at least going on. The other side of it is, I think it's kind of important to have that, again, to point out that ties into our own small town. If anyone here lives in a small town, you know, and you could imagine, like you said, it as a parlor game, you know, something that you do on an ongoing basis with a friend as almost a joke. It lets us know that not only can that happen in our small town, but the real, true, evil one can also happen in our small town. That's how I see it.
That's what I think is the most important thing in the whole deal. Yeah, absolutely right.
I mean, I think he actually even, Uncle Charlie said it at the bar. I don't know the name of that bar, but I think it was like 2 o'clock or whatever it's called, the bar. But he literally said you can take any house or any home and pull back the curtain of the facade and see the swine. I forgot the exact line he used, but he believes that everybody, in essence, the Uncle Charlie was evil to some degree. I love that aspect of him. I mean, that's very Hitchcockian. That everybody's a killer. Your next door neighbor on rear window, South by Southwest, Rope. Everybody's a killer. You just don't know it yet. I love that part.
And trying to figure it out.
Good. We have two. Yep. Go ahead, George. You pick one.
I don't know.
I think we have room for 2 more questions, Matt. Okay, yeah, 2 more.
Just to continue that topic, do you think the girl Charlie ever thought of killing Uncle Charlie?
What did he say?
I know she did, but was she planning it?
I think that's one of those great questions of what's going on that we don't know or don't see or we can speculate to. I think that it was fantastic where she actually says it to him. I had forgotten that. The fact that she says, "I'll kill you myself." That, for 1943, from a female character, a young female, that's a big deal, right? That's a force. Whether she was actually considering it, I can't speak to that, but I would hope so.
You know what I thought when I was watching that, and to go to your question, because I still believe they're basically one Charlie. And it's, you know, not to sound corny, but it's like Harry Potter, only one could live. Literally, one had to die for the other one to move on. And so when Charlie killed Uncle Charlie, to me, it was more of getting rid of that element, pushing it out.
Of herself.
Of herself. It was a metaphor, not really of she being a killer. Who's next? We got one right here, Georgia. Oh, maybe there was I apologize. Georgia's got it.
You know, the year is 1943 when this comes out. When did he write it? Because there's no mention at the dinner table of the war. You can see men in uniform in the movie. You have the whole incest question between young Charlie and Uncle Charlie. And then you have, you know, for that time, I imagine the two young girls checking out Uncle Charlie was pretty risque. Did this have any problems with the Legion of Decency or whatever the rating thing was at that point in time?
Joan, I think this one might be your question.
My only thought on that is there was no Legion of Decency back then. I think that Legion of Decency came in the late 40s and 50s, where they started rank. Yeah. Do you know when that came in?
Around the 1930s.
30s? I stand corrected.
I think he's talking about the Hayes office.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
there was the Hayes office and the Hayes Code, and there was a number of things that worked around that. There was only, I believe, one reference, or two references to the war. One was, as you said, military personnel, young military personnel, but also in the library. I don't know if you noticed it, but there was headlines that named some of the leaders, and there was specific things from the war in those headlines. But you really, really have to be paying attention. So it's not specifically addressed in the film.
Am I crazy, or when you put Alfred Hitchcock and this writer, this incredible writer, together, you've got something you don't see any other place. And it's very hard to figure out what they were doing, because they're both so unpredictable, wonderfully unpredictable.
I would love to be there when they had that meeting. You know, Thornton Wilder's probably sitting on a table saying, you know, we got to give people a meaning to life. And Alfred Hitchcock's like, when can we kill them? We got room for one more question. Good, right there.
Going to the backstory of each character, after the two attempts on young Charlie's life, and the mother then getting in the car and saying, gee, two accidents, the steps and now this. Do you think, looking at her backstory and her history with her brother, Uncle Charlie, do you think that, do you think that, that she suspected Uncle Charlie? Do you think she had like a reason to suspect that he was dangerous?
I think there's a wonderful, quick moment where she kind of says that, and I don't think, or at least today, you wouldn't need to say it. You could just go with the look. But she had those quick lines, that's peculiar, and then she goes. And it's this little moment of, I don't know if I was reading too much into it, but I think she suspects her brother. Now think about that. If anyone here has a sibling, all right, and again, this is the type of story that you're supposed to buy into in your small town with your small family, your average family. Even I've got two crazy brothers, and I've heard all kinds of things about them that I defended or said that was not them. But if it came down to it, I would think that I would side with them. But then, if it's too much, what do you do in that moment? The daughter doesn't say anything. Young Charlie doesn't say anything because she doesn't want to upset her mother. What kind of excuse is that? But you get it, right? You get it. And then if that's the same case with the mother, she doesn't want to believe it or share that with it. We all do that. We all block things out. We all refuse to acknowledge things. But am I reading too much into that? That one glance?
I think you're absolutely right. That's what I loved about the whole thing, is you never know what's really going on in anybody. And you have to think about that and guess about it. That's why they're so amazing together, those two men.
Stephanie, I just want to get your read on this based on her question. There's a tragedy that happens to Uncle Charlie that really changes him. We hear that when he's in the bed, they show him the picture, they talk about the bike accident. I mean, this again is Thornton Wilder's whole philosophy, that a tragedy changes you. Can you what's your take on that? The fact that Uncle Charlie did change after that tragedy. And that's something that Thornton Wilder really writes about a lot.
Yeah, tragedy does change you, but again, I go to the almost randomness of the early act. What happened to him as a child? It wasn't what you're talking about so articulately here. the intentionality, it's just life. And it changed him forever.
A random bike accident.
A random bike accident.
All right, we have one more question in us. Right here.
I'm glad you mentioned Hitchcock's wife because she usually had a lot to do with it. But the other thing I know about the father and his friend, and I've seen Hitchcock interviewed, he loved collecting stories like that, of murder, of strange things, of strange, ironic situations. And this would have just been his way of doing, like he always said that he thought Psycho was a comedy, or, at least humorous. And I just think he put them in because, and you heard the people laughing today, he knew you had to make the audience laugh in order to scare them better and shock them better.
I just have to ask this question now that before we end. How many people now look at this film differently, thinking maybe Thornton Wilder had a lot more influence than you might have walked in here with? Did people change their minds, or they still think this is a Hitchcock film all the way? Just curious, okay. Well, just as a reminder before we end, March 19th, we're doing this again. Great John Ford movie, The Quiet Man. And there'll be a play after. I don't have to talk too much about the play, but what's the name of the play?
Play is Dancing at Lunasa by Brian Friel, about 5 unmarried Irish sisters. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous play.
And when does that one come out?
That one is in the spring. That one it opens on April 14th.
So just remember, February 17th, right, is the bridge. So please come check that one out here. Thank you very much, and please come to the Monmouth Film Festival in August. Thank you.